a iniciar, en este caso con uno de nuestros alumnos, Enrico Becerra, pero bueno, pues como a todos nos ha pasado hoy, el tráfico nos está jugando una mala pasada, pero entonces pues vamos a hacer el cierre con él, no pasa nada, y pues vamos a introducir ahorita a Clynton Taylor. En primer lugar, antes de esto, también quería comentaros que mañana es el último día para inscribirse en el MBI. Estamos buscando el último perfil de excelencia para el inicio de esta generación de MBI de 2017, enero. El MBI es un máster de 2 años que está dirigido precisamente a emprendedores, trabajadores, gente que tenga una vida laboral bastante activa y por eso mismo se hace solo un fin de semana al mes. Clynton Taylor es uno de los profesores del mismo, entonces van a poder conocerles. También quería comunicaros que este año vamos a abrir por primera vez 4 masterclasses, 4 workshops, de los cuales Clynton Taylor también es uno de nuestros profesores. Y el próximo es el que él imparte, que es Experience Mapping Work con Clynton Taylor, el 3, 4 y 5 de marzo. Toda esta información la tenéis en nuestras redes sociales, la podéis buscar ahí y conmigo también. El próximo workshop, son de un fin de semana, es el Retail Innovation con Tony Binum, el 12, 13 y 14 de mayo. El siguiente es Organizational Design, no sé si eso lo conocéis un poquito más porque esta es la tercera vez que lo abrimos, con Bob Gower, el 14, 15 y 16 de julio. Y el último es Positive Psychology con Patrick Jordan, el 22, 23 y 24 de septiembre. No me voy a dilatar mucho más porque ya estamos todos bastante impacientes. Quiero presentar a Clynton, que bueno, es experto en innovación, psicología organizacional y diseño y ha trabajado con empresas bastante importantes, con Harley-Davidson, que esa pues mola mucho, como decimos en España, con Target, PepsiCo y FedEx, esas de las más importantes. Y además es vicepresidente de estrategia en Scansion. Entonces, bueno, le quiero presentar, quiero que le recibáis con un gran aplauso y muchas gracias por venir, Clynton.
Gracias. ¿Estamos bien? Thank you for hanging in there. Mucho tráfico, right? So, I was able to talk with a few of you to get a sense of why you're here, and not everybody, but some of the questions on people's minds are, how do you create an innovation mindset? How do you create the change within yourself to be able to help a group change and therefore help the customer experience get better? Also, when it comes to change within a company that's been around a while, you know, they're successful, how do you actually cause change? Because honestly, the hardest companies to change are the most successful ones. They're going to need to, but hey, if everything's going all right, why do I need to do that? So we're going to hit on some of those questions, not everything, but I invite you to find me afterwards, and if you've got specific questions, we can talk about it. We're also going to have a question and answer time, which is perfect to ask a question because maybe I don't know the answer, but someone else here is dealing with something very similar and has something they can provide. So, excellent. So we are talking about culture. Culture in the sense of a group of people coming together. We have different cultures within countries, but we're talking specifically within an organization. And how many people work within an organization of at least 100 people? Anyone with large work in an organization more than 1,000 people? More than 10,000? Okay. How many? All right, 100,000? Okay. They do exist out there. How many people are in like a small group? It's either a startup, it's a small company, under 10 or so. Okay, great, that's a really good mix. So, you know, even within a small group, there are different types of subculture. Sometimes someone in a financial mindset is not quite seeing the same vision you have perhaps in marketing. So that's what we're talking about, culture, and we're talking about how to help craft a culture of innovation. Let me start with a question about these dudes. What do they have in common? For those over here, 3 white gringo guys. And let me hear it. What do they have in common? Vision, innovation, Successful. So just so we're clear, we're talking about Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and this guy, Steve Jobs. What else do they have in common? Different. Yeah, they were created a disruption. Okay, innovative. Failed. So they're kind of riding on the wave of change. Great. Now, one of the things they have in common that isn't often what you heard is that all three of them did not invent the product or service that they are now famous for. Thomas Edison did not invent the light bulb by a long ways. Henry Ford invent the car? Not by a long shot. Steve Jobs invent the iPhone or the Mac or the computer? No, not at all. What's interesting is that these three guys are often called out, and I know from my daughter's school, often called out as like they learn he invented the light bulb. Actually, what Edison did was he invented the network and the ability to think big that this would be something that could actually light up a whole city. Henry Ford, yes, the chain of production there, right? Production line. And Steve Jobs, you might say, bringing design and aesthetics into everyday objects is one element of it. Henry Ford said it really well. I invented nothing new. I simply assembled into a car the discoveries of other men behind me who had centuries of work. Had I worked 50, 10, or even just 5 years before, I would have failed. To teach that a comparatively few men are responsible for the greatest forward steps of mankind is the worst sort of nonsense. So there you have it, from a guy who's credited us in inventing a whole industry, saying, if it was even 5 years earlier, I would have completely failed. It's everybody else that I'm building on. What is innovation? That's what we're here talking about. Innovation equals what? Creativity and application. Okay, good. Being different. A need. Can't have innovation if there's not a need that you're solving. I like these answers because what's embedded in that, and some explicitly saying, that it's an invention, it's an idea, but it's got implementation as a big part of that. You think about it, coming up with just an idea, that happens a lot. Maybe it's a bad idea, maybe it's a great idea, but if it doesn't get implemented, if it doesn't find its way to someone who's willing to give you something of value for it, that's just an idea. So much of innovation seems to be described as this, right? The most innovative people, well, they came out with this product, or they came up with this new service, or this company they created, right? But if you look at something like an Uber, was it really that novel of an idea to catch a ride with somebody else? How long have we been doing this, right? That's existed. The idea was there. The implementation, now that was rather unique. Not quite as sexy as something completely new, like a Tesla car, but innovation because of the implementation. Worked with a number of companies, and if you worked in a large company, probably any size company, or consulted with them, you're probably familiar with this. I was working with PepsiCo, and in Purchase, New York, they actually have an area, a pretty decent-sized room, a large closet, and if you open up that door and walk in, you see all sorts of posters. You see stacks and stacks of reports. You open them up, beautiful pictures of products. It's what they lovingly refer to as the ideas graveyard. It's like talking with them. They have amazing ideas, and they paid $300,000 here, $1 million there, just like many companies, to come up with a great new energy drink. Or wait, this is not just an energy drink, this is a downer drink. This is how you calm down. They've got every idea you can imagine pretty much. We realize, well, why are we being hired to come up with ideas? They actually need to know what are the right ideas and then how to actually implement those ideas, how to get them out there, how to actually make that idea a reality. So it's the implementation part that I want us to talk about, or at least underscore, point to as saying that's a really critical part that we often forget when it comes to innovation. Implementation, we're not having lots of these examples of great implementation, partially because it's really difficult. The number of times that a great idea just kind of dies, they get $10 million as a startup for funding, but it just doesn't go anywhere. Great, they learned something, excellent, that's part of innovation. But often they did not focus on the implementation side. Why is it so hard? Because it requires change. Implementation is change across a group of people, right? Because it's implementation to get towards innovation, not just an idea. I can have an idea on my own, perhaps, but I need a group of people to implement it. And change is really, really hard. And if you're anything like me, I'm like, no, I love change. I'm in the innovation space. I breathe on change, right? No, I'm not stuck in my ways. And then someone asked me, where did you go to lunch yesterday? This Vietnamese sandwich place across the road. Where did you go Wednesday? The Vietnamese sandwich place. Tuesday? Like, damn it, I'm doing the exact same thing every single day. Well, that part of my life, I don't like to change too much. If it's working well, I don't want to think about having to get some great food. I go and get it. Every one of us can find a moment in our lives where it can be difficult for us to change. That's what makes this so hard. A friend of mine, a former colleague, she was listening to a talk about change and how important it was within a company, and it was very much kind of the talk that was, you just have to decide to change, and the rest follows. She raised her hand. I love how she told this story. She raised her hand and she said, if it's so hard for me to be able to get my boyfriend to put his socks in the dirty hamper, how do you expect I'm going to change my team to do a completely new way of operating? Kind of stumped him. Like, well, it's true. It is not that easy. Change is difficult. But we can agree change is necessary for innovation, especially when it comes to implementation. If you look back over innovation and how the history of it in, let's say, the last 20, 30 years, innovation, of course, has always been around before we call it innovation. Design thinking's always been around before we call it design thinking. But there is definitely a period where we lost touch with who our users are, who our actual customers are, or let's actually call them people, who those people were that we're serving. As the company started to get back into it, you might say about 30 years ago, we need to be more creative. You probably haven't heard the phrase, think outside the box. Of course you have. Everybody, think outside the box. Came around the same time. Ethnography, anthropology, saying, social sciences, let's bring some of those methods in and go out and spend time with people and really listen to our customers. That was all part of this first wave. Next wave, and it worked out really well. You came up with lots of interesting new products, a new way to go shopping, a new online platform, all these sorts of new products, right? Sometimes, though, more than not, unfortunately, companies came up with something that was just amazing. It was definitely out of the box, but how the heck would they actually implement that? You know how much money it would cost us to do that, was the response from the company. We don't even have a manufacturing plant that can do that. We're talking about $1 million change just to be able to put a prototype together. I'm sorry, but that's not a good idea if we can't implement it. So bringing in financial analytics and analysis methods and saying, you know, actually let some of those MBAs back in. Let's work on how to actually make this a viable business was the second wave, a critical wave, right? You've got to be able to make money, otherwise it's just an academic endeavor. As fun as the conversation is, you're not making money. The third wave, which I'd say is what we're really experiencing a lot now, is around company culture. Okay, we have an amazing idea. We're pretty darn sure we can make money with that idea, and we can get it to market. What do we actually do about us internally? Wait a minute, who should lead this? What team should do this? This isn't really marketing, this isn't really engineering. It's kind of a new way to think about the business and our customers. Company culture is a real big important aspect now. So I'm going to focus on the company culture when we talk about innovation and change. Just a look at what culture is and why it's difficult to get your hand around. If we had more time, we'd have a conversation about, well, what is culture? And we'd have all sorts of different aspects, and they're all close, and I'm sure spot on in many ways, but there are explicit factors when we talk about a culture. If you go visit someone, a friend at their company, like went to Google, I could say, well, the culture is like, wow, what was it like? Well, they had these colorful bikes people rode around on. I could go and I could eat for free. There was no like checkout. I could eat any kind of food. People said that they didn't actually know what they were working on that day. They were going to make it up as they went. Things like that. It's like, okay, I heard some stories, I saw certain behaviors, and I saw what the desk looks like and what the cafeteria looks like and when people come. That's all part of a window into what the culture is, but there's so many more things that drive what a culture is. Why I show up to work, why I decide to be a part of this craziness. Some of the values, right? What are the values that everybody together says this is why we are here? Cultural frames, narratives, the stories that people tell, there's often aspects of what's meaningful to them that are hidden within those. What does the CEO say to people? When he wants to address the company, what does he do? Does he do it from his mansion on high through a video? Does he show up in a room like this on a platform? Does he go around to each group and spend time with them? Those all make up the culture. But I just wanted to bring this distinction out that it's not as easy as observing and talking with a few people. Culture is a lot more going underneath. And for those, actually, the lighting's not turning up. I should have started by describing this is an iceberg. So just much like the Titanic, you see a little bit on top, but it's really all the underneath that you're not seeing at first is what matters most. Talk about culture and the need for it. Lou Gerstner, former CEO of IBM, really helped turn around IBM as a company. Said, I came to see my time at IBM that culture isn't just one aspect of it. It is the game. Now, this is someone dealing with hundreds of thousands of employees, right, around the world. Massive amounts of money coming and going. In a time where they're transitioning from products to services. I mean, talk about a massive change. The business challenge is a nightmare. He stepped into that, but what he learned is that culture isn't just something I need to consider. On Wednesday is when we're going to have our culture conversation. It was the game. If he did not have everybody bought into why they need to change, how what they did every day rolled up and impacted the change, it never would have happened. Unfortunately, as many leaders would lament behind closed doors, you can't just make people change. You can't just say, you are now going to do this. Perhaps it lingers from manufacturing plants where, initially maybe you could think that you could get away with someone telling them to use their right hand to pick up before they put it in with the left hand on the roll there. But certainly not today. There's just no way you can change people immediately. This gets back a little bit to the question I asked you. When we're talking about change, I'm going to talk a lot about the larger cultural change with organization, but it's really important that if you walk away with only one thing, you remember this, that if the world can only change from within, if you want to be able to make a change, you can't expect to change the environment around you if you're not willing to change yourself. It also is really important to understand that for an employee, you cannot cause that change. You cannot make that change happen. So you have to actually pause for a minute and say, wow, get into their mind, what do they want? They have to desire that change themselves. Those are kind of messy conversations. Those are difficult things. Those are aspects that sometimes someone's childhood comes into play there, right? The first experience they had at a startup, their expectations are different. But if you can't understand how that you need to change yourself and understand how the change happens within each of your employees, the larger scale change is not going to happen. Okay, so we can only change our behavior and reinforce the behavioral change in others. So I'm going to talk about 5 imperatives. They're not saying these are the most important imperatives. With these 5, if you follow them to a T, you will have an innovation culture. But these are very important aspects that have some good examples that I think will help you consider something that you can actually do tomorrow or Monday. And that's, by the way, is the goal. Is that there's some little bit in here somewhere that by Monday you have made a change. You've picked up the phone and talked with someone. You've gone out to lunch with a colleague that you haven't reconnected with for a while. You've actually sat down with somebody and just listened and didn't tell them what they should do for one moment. Okay. So play together. It's an important one. Now, this is often what I would admit, the word play is often what turns off executives from the whole idea of culture, right? This is business. We're not here to play. We're here to make money. It's not fun, okay? Sometimes it's difficult. I need people that will push through. Well, if you're like me, you've had an experience like that, and it's not very successful. Play can show up in many different ways, but it's the aspect of being comfortable enough to try something new with those around you and to not take yourself too seriously. Coca-Cola, a colleague of mine shared a story, and they were a small group within a whole manufacturing plant, a bottling plant, and they were working a lot on the marketing materials, direct marketing, in-store promotional things. So if there's going to be a World Cup, for example, they were the ones to figure out what the messaging would be, how it would literally get from point A to point B to promote how Coca-Cola is part of this innovative World Cup or Olympics, right? So in that small group, there were certain rules, you know. You had to be there by a certain time, had to be there by 9, had to leave at 5, because that's what everybody else had to do within the plant, and you had to be serious. Yeah, you kind of had to look like you're busy and get that work done because the boss might just come by. And by the boss, they meant the senior vice president of operations, or even the CEO would stop by sometimes. In this group, they decided that they were going to buck the rules and they were going to spend a little time jamming together. They realized that these 5 people, they all like to play instruments, and they're all kind of good at it. So they brought it in one afternoon, they brought in a couple beers, and they just kept jamming together and having a great time. Through that interaction, things got looser and ideas started to flow. Not that that's what they're planning on, but they realized part of the challenge they had of how to save money and get these materials, like large format posters that are on foam core, how to get those just to sites that are very rural was very costly. If you're going to FedEx, it's going to be exorbitant. They realized in this kind of free-flow play that they could actually take the little bit of room, just about 5 inches on a truck above all the bottles, and they could design their posters a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, and they would slide right in on top there. Now, that's pretty cool. We're nodding our head like, yeah, that's pretty cool. But when you think about a scale of Coca-Cola, we're talking millions of dollars saved every single season. Suddenly the Super Bowl's happening, you can count on this many $1 million being saved. Small, interesting change about a challenge they were working on for a long time, but actually just starting to jam together, it got their mind in that alpha mode, and they were able to come up with some interesting ideas. CEO, by the way, did stop by not long after, heard about this idea, and said, that is fantastic. It rolled into something much larger that the design team global worked on, and that they actually took all of the assets around the world and created a way for everyone to access them in a much faster, efficient way without losing the localization that's important within every culture. So just to say, it went on to become something much bigger. Embed customer empathy. Customer empathy, we talk about it, we don't do it enough. Warby Parker, in the US, they are lenswear makers. They decided they were going to cut out the middleman, and all of the eyewear and glasses and things, they were going to go directly from where they make it to the customer. So using the web, I'd get 3 pairs, I'd try them. This one's great, return the others, no problem. They first started in Philadelphia, and the founder often would get a call. You don't have many people. You pick up the phone when it rings. It was a customer. They were having difficulty deciding on a certain frame. He's like, actually, you're just down the road from me. Why don't you come over to my place? And he actually, in his living room, he had all of the eyewear and the stock launched. And so he would work with them, and he realized the value of things that he would learn. He's like, there's a business opportunity here. I'm going to try something new. Or, that lenswear line is not working. We thought it would be great for this reason, but it is not working. When they got much bigger, they moved to New York. They built out beautiful new office space. He remembered what the value was of having empathy by having the customer around all the time. So they built their offices on first level up. On the ground floor, they made sure they had room for a showroom. The very first showroom was right downstairs. So you can imagine you're in a boardroom and you're talking about distribution, you're talking about projections. Something comes up and is not quite sure what the customer would think. They would actually pause that conversation, walk downstairs, hang out with their customers, and learn a little something. So staying close to your customer is really, really important. Incidentally, I don't know if you've noticed, but it seems the larger the company, the higher the building is that they are in. Plenty here, the Santa Fe are down here, right? Who's at the top always? The executives, right? The CEO. They literally go further and further and further as they get larger from the ground floor, outside where every single customer is. In some cases, you hop in a helicopter and go straight to your home. You don't even see the people that you're serving. I think it has something to do with so many larger companies losing their way in understanding what their customers need. Rethink the rules. We touched on this a little bit. And the rules is very purposefully mentioned like this, right? There are so many things that my background for grad school was organizational psychology. How do people work together? And doing some of the research, going into companies, interviewing them, observing, then consulting with a lot of different companies over the last 20 years, there's a phrase you hear so often, that's like, yeah, that's just not the way we do things around here. That's just not the way we do things around here. Talking about a rule that perhaps isn't even written down. Automatic, you might know them, a company, it's been around 10 years now, about 500 employees, but they created many products, but the one they're most famous for perhaps is WordPress.com. So many different websites you could customize and do that. It was an open source platform to begin with, and the CEO in creating that decided, just because we've done things in previous companies a certain way, or just because best practices for a company is to do things a certain way, doesn't mean that works. Open source the ideas, maybe we should open source our employee involvement. So what they decided to do is that you could work anywhere you wanted. The rule of you must be in the same room to be able to innovate every day, they said, not quite sure that's actually the way it's going to be. The rule that said you had to work between 9 and 5 or regular hours, I'm not so sure that's going to help us. They threw that out too. What they ended up with, and it's been very successful, is a program where you could work anywhere in the world. In fact, they have 500 employees spread across 50 countries at the moment, or as of last year. That's really, really disparate. That's really risky. But what they found is that when folks are able to enjoy their life and do things that they would want to do on their own time, it was really helpful. They were more productive. Now, one aspect you say, well, isn't that counter to a big principle in innovation that collaboration is important? Well, yes, it's not entirely alone. But what was really interesting is they said, first, when you join, you have $2,000 to create a home office, to upgrade it, so that you can easily connect with anybody that you want. Also, we're going to give you the normal budget of having a downtown Manhattan or San Francisco office space, a lot of money. We're going to save a lot and then distribute that across the teams. So once a quarter, what you need to do is create a hackathon and get 10 other people together. You can do that anywhere you want. You need to be productive, okay, but if you really want to go to Playa del Carmen, go for it. We're paying for it. So that's what happens. Every quarter or so, you get a bunch of different people together from different units. The collaboration is actually fiercer, if you will, because they're there longer. The collaboration is also more at will because they're in some place that they really like, and they know they can go back, and if they want to be able to think alone, they can do that. So completely blew up several rules around how you're supposed to work with your employees. They also have adopted, no surprise, no vacation policy. basically limitless vacation, which fits nicely in with what they were doing. All of these examples are not to say that it would work in your company. Just put that caveat. You can say, Clynton told me no vacation. I told you to think about it. The different cultures that you have in different places are there for a reason. Sometimes they are hindering innovation. Sometimes they are actually promoting a different type of innovation. So it's important to think holistically about what's most important for your company. However, some companies like GE doing away with the much loved, I say in jest, employee review every year is quite significant. They decided they're not going to do reviews at all. It's going to be much more in the moment, frequent, not like you wait a year before you really have that tough conversation. Well, these are the folks we were just talking about. Reward collective learning. Let me ask you a question once it pops up. Which hospital would you go to? You need a surgery. You have two options. Hospital 1 has an error rate of 15%, meaning 15 people out of 100, something goes wrong. Not all those 15 die. Every once in a while, one does, unfortunately. That's Hospital 1. Hospital 2 has an error rate when it comes to the surgery you're looking to do of 5%. The question that Amy Edmondson posed, Harvard professor and author, proposed to us was, which one would you choose? Now, obviously, a question like that, you know there's a trick. No one's going to say, well, I'm going to 15% error versus 5. Of course, we're going to do 5%, right? What she found is the opposite. You want to go with the hospital that has a 15% error rate. Why? Well, it's pretty average. Every single company, every single hospital has about a 15% error rate when it comes to these sorts of surgeries. However, the reason you want to go to the one that says they have 15 is something that she calls psychological safety. Meaning, the 5% are lying, or most likely, things are going unreported. So an error happens, we're just going to keep that to our team. It's really embarrassing for me as a doctor. I may get fired. I'm going to just ignore that. They didn't die. Everything is okay. I learned my lesson. I'm not going to do that anymore. You need to be able to learn. You need to be able to collectively learn on those ideas. If you have an environment that every employee's got a question mark when they think they screwed up or they see someone else screw up, you're not going to learn. What you need is a psychological safety to be able to say, look, what's more important than anything here is that we learn, and that goes outside of hospitals too, any business. We need to be able to learn. If we're not sharing, we can't learn. And if we're not sharing because I feel like I might be in trouble personally, then that's a problem. So what she has proposed is that psychological safety actually unlocks the real intense collective learning that puts you ahead, and that is critical for innovation. We won't go into details, but a really great framework here to help to think about. Again, Amy Edmondson at Harvard Business Review wrote this. Psychological safety, you have low and high. Accountability, low and high. It's a really important distinction she makes. If you're low psychological safety and low accountability, mean the chance that I'm going to be in trouble are high, but probably nothing will happen about it. It's apathy. What does it matter, right? I don't really care. Just do whatever. Comfort zone, high psychological safety. I'm going to say, hey, I screwed up. But if it's low accountability, it doesn't mean you do anything about it, right? It's like, okay, we're a support group for everybody who failed. That's not learning. High accountability, low psychological safety. Like if I might say one thing, I might get fired. That's anxiety zone. Many of us have been there. It is painful, and you cannot last there long. It certainly is not a place where learning happens. The learning zone, high psychological safety, again, saying, hey, I screwed up. Here's what I think happened, or I'm not sure what happened. Let's figure it out together. Psychological safety. High accountability means, okay, so therefore this is what we are going to do, and I'm going to own that, and I'm going to make sure that we get this knowledge spread out, or we find a solution. That's where learning zone actually happens. So, reward collective learning. It's really important, the word reward as well. We could do a whole conversation about how the CEO gets up and talks about this is the change that needs to happen. We need to be more visionary, revolutionary, uses all that jargon. But when it comes to payday, we're giving bonuses to people who hit their sales quota for this month. Well, I have to learn to be able to what this new business is. I have to find a new option. I need to sell that. That's going to take at least a year. What are you actually doing? If you're providing an incentive for monthly effort, you're not going to be able to do innovation. So reward collective learning. And the last one, focus on a single goal. There's a book called Habits, and in it is a fascinating story. You might have heard, some of you might have heard. Paul O'Neill was brought in, this is quite a while ago, I think it was early 90s, brought in to help Alcoa become even better. Alcoa, there's a Coke can there. Most of the aluminum cans are created from aluminum that comes from Alcoa. Other things, but that's their core business. He was brought in to help the company become even more successful. They weren't in the dumps, they weren't horrible, but they knew there was a lot more potential. He had his first shareholder meeting, a massive room, 10 times this size, right? You've got shareholders who own a huge stake in the business, and this is the new CEO's time to say, this is what needs to happen, this is what I'm going to stand by, this is how successful we're going to be, right? Rah, rah, rah. He stood up there and said, I only care about one thing. I only care about employee safety. Employee safety? Okay, yeah, got to be safe, right? We can't be killing our employees. But I care about one thing. Okay, he's just kind of in jest. We'll get to the numbers sooner or later. Didn't get to any of the specific numbers. Did not get to, these are my projections. These are the new hires I'm bringing in, the smartest from McKinsey and so forth. None of that normal conversation. There was a stakeholder owned a ton of shares. He tells a story, says, at that moment after he stopped, I knew it's crazy. It's going to, excuse my language, it's going to shit. I ran out the back, I picked up my phone and said, sell everything we own of Alcoa, all our customers. That actually happened. Okay, one thing being safety. Is it really the way? He continued that conversation. He knew he needed to communicate it every single time he met with people. He met with the regional directors of sales, and he sat down with them, and they're like, okay, we got some great news for you. And he was like, I'm sure you do, but I'm here just to know, how are you doing on employee safety? What do you mean? Yeah, everybody's fine, but look at these numbers. What are you going to do to make employee safety more important? That conversation, that question was echoed in every single meeting he had. He'd run into somebody on a plant floor, he would ask that question. Ask an executive, same question. Tragically, there was a moment where somebody stepped in the way of a large machine and was killed instantly. Horrible, it does happen, but it was horrible. He called every single one of his direct reports, said, we need to meet right now. That next day, they flew in from different areas. They sat down with the CEO, Paul O'Neill, and he said, how could we let this happen? We killed that man. Okay, over dramatic, come on, yes, it happens, it's horrible. We'll fix it, don't worry about it. It's like, no, you don't understand. This cannot happen. It means we did not do something to enable that. We even enabled a culture where people thought it would be okay to actually take a shortcut where we have the line that says no walking. So I want to know within 24 hours going forward if there's any injury anywhere. Sounds absolutely crazy. What that meant was that you need to pick up the phone immediately. If you're a plant manager, you need to talk to your boss, you need to talk to his regional boss, so forth, to happen. That was really rapid. One of his executives, something happened in his plant, and he told him, don't worry about it, it's fine. Paul O'Neill got wind of that, he was fired. He was fired because he didn't call you that someone got a paper cut? This is nuts. It turned out, all that conversation, focusing on employee safety, Paul O'Neill had the last word. He knew, if I had to transform Alcoa, but I can't, said, but you can't order people to change. So I decided I was going to start by focusing on one thing. if I could start disrupting the habits around one thing, it would spread throughout the entire company. He realized innovation, transformation, happened by change, and change within each single person. Was he really thinking employee safety was the only factor that was going to make this company successful, or even one of the top 3 most important factors? I don't know. Pretty sure it wasn't just employee safety. What he really understood is that by creating employee safety, something that every single person in the company would be fine in supporting, who is not going to say, I want to make a safer environment. He would cause action. He would cause change. And that was the recipe to actually make innovation happen. That stakeholder, the shareholder that ran out and said, sell all of Alcoa, he's on the record as saying, biggest mistake of my life. I never dreamed, but by causing that focus and that change, the company transformed. The company did fantastically, even better. And by the way, employee safety got better. It was still really good. It got even better. So, 5 imperatives for creating a culture of innovation, but crafting that. Play together. It's a weird word. It feels odd at first. Find ways to play. Amazing things will happen with your team and with your boss too. Embed customer empathy. It's really important to constantly be close to your customers. You're going to have a better culture if people understand who they are actually serving. Rethink the rules. Just because that's the way we do things around here is not reason enough. If anything, I would say if you hear that, whatever they're talking about is probably where you need to start to think about change. Reward collective learning. Psychological safety, Amy Edmondson. Don't punish somebody for making a mistake. Reward them for together solving that mistake and coming up with a new solution. All sorts of innovation happens that way. And focus on a single goal. This is a daunting thing, we know, changing oneself. Changing my team is difficult. Changing the company, really, really hard. Don't try and do everything at once. Don't try and focus on many things. In fact, you can argue you can really just focus on one thing. Find out what's most important within your group and focus on that for now. All right. Thank you for your attention. If you want to connect with me, easiest way, Twitter, @Clynton, LinkedIn. I thank my parents every day in social media that they gave me a Y in my name because I can actually get it. If it's Clynton with an I would be Clynton 1973 or something. So thank you very much, guys. You have that? We have some time for questions, yeah?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Questions, thoughts, and it can simply be an experience that you've had that you want to share with other people because they can benefit from it.
¿Alguna pregunta? Venga. Tenéis aquí a un expertazo y nadie tiene ninguna pregunta, ya lo sabéis todo. Para llamaros a vosotros, que seguro salís más baratos la próxima vez. Ah, ok.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. You mentioned Coca-Cola. And what's interesting about Coca-Cola, most people don't realize they have more trucks than like FedEx and UPS combined.
Those deliveries, exactly.
Yes, exactly. And but it's interesting because often Coca-Cola didn't realize that. So what can happen within a company to make a company realize all of the resources that they actually have? I mean, that was one example, but I think there's a lot of times a company doesn't realize the actual resources they have because they only look at them in one way. This truck is made only to deliver Coca-Cola.
Yeah, right. Right. So what are the core competencies of the organization? Sometimes they are softer. Sometimes it is the culture, which you could argue is part of what made Pixar so successful. But sticking with Coca-Cola, a perfect example was, and it happened right here. Well, Coca-Cola, one of their big assets in Mexico and a lot of similar countries in the Americas, is that they are in every single location and they have access to that. So all this mom and pop shops, which is the vast majority of how they get things out there, are all sorts of rural environments. So at headquarters, Joe Butler came in and created a program called, he's head of design, created a program called Founders. And what that was doing is looking at the startups and saying, we need more of that. We need more creativity like a startups, but man, we get scale like nobody else. We can scale like crazy. So, a match made in heaven. They created these programs where there are two founders in lots of places. Sydney was the first one in LA, and also Mexico was one of the first, I think, 8. There was a company here, a duo, that it's a fascinating story that I'd tell more if I had more time. But they looked at all the core competencies and looked at the assets in a new way, part of what the program was designed to do, and said, okay, how could we actually leverage perhaps trucks and the access that we have? Lots of different conversations focusing on millennial needs, what they came up with, and how many people have heard of Weeks? W-E-E-X. All right, millennials, good, it's working. I'll tell them. What they realized is that a huge pain point plus their access to all these locations is what they would focus on. The pain point, we're in Telmex, so I'll go lightly. Not everybody was thrilled with Telcel. A big pain point, we'll just keep it at that. We appreciate Telmex having us here. But there was some frustration, right? What they realized that, okay, we're going to enable folks to be able to decide what sort of phone usage they have, data and voice, based on their needs, based on the week or even day. I'm going to go out on the weekend, I can get a package, the dating package, which gives me Tinder, it gives me Uber, and it gives me Foursquare, I think it is. So I can find a good place to eat, I can get there and back, and I can find the right person to do it with, right? Interesting. So that is starting to blow up, really massive sign up, but it's because they know that they can get these goods to all those different locations that it was going to be successful. So 7-Eleven, OXXO, you'd be able to find that no matter where you are and be able to use it. So a lot more to that story, but that's an interesting example of taking a look at, we're not just delivering bottles of sugar water, we're actually providing interesting access to the masses. What could we do with that? So they actually hit that one right on the head. Other questions? Yes?
Voy.
Un momento.
Thank you very much. Well, the point is this. You mentioned culture. And culture, it's what happens in any organization. And in small organizations, it happens to be that culture, it's something that rewards to the boss. In many organizations, the culture is, okay, you need to achieve your goals, but you need also, and maybe more important, you need the big boss to be happy. And that means anything. And your first step, play together. Sometimes it's painful for the owner, for the big boss, or for someone in charge to say, okay, let's play together, because to quit from the position that I know everything and I need to provide voice and I need to provide both for everyone, I need to, just that single step, it's painful for organization. Yeah. And in my experience, what helps to go to this change, it's normally when people when the organization comes into a crisis. So when they realize, okay, this is not helping, so I need to do something. And sometimes happen that people in charge need even to go through some external aid as a kind of therapy.
Right, it's difficult. To
get ready to quit from the privilege they used to have and start heading to this
direction. So the question in a couple of questions, I think. One, change has to happen across the company. It's often most difficult at the top because the incentive program and many other things is kind of built to serve that individual. Right. Was there a second question in there?
No, it was just my vision to this problem or this circumstance.
Yeah, and it's really important, because if you look at the change that happens within or culture in general, communities, it's often tied up with the companies. Right. So if we can't get those to change, it's kind of hard to imagine how we're going to get all the other problems solved. So to the specific question, yeah, the incentives that are provided say so much. culture, I like to say, is never the values on the wall or what the CEO says. In fact, it's never what the CEO says, that's for sure. It's what actually happens. And it's if nothing changes in how you reward people, if in a room, everyone becomes silent when the boss is ready to talk,
Right.
it's not going to happen. I can have creativity and collaboration, make up new words even, right?
Right.
It's not changing the culture if I'm not listening to everybody in the room. So all those factors are really, really important. And you can look at it different ways, but one way to look at this, there's 7 different ways as an executive that you can help change the culture, help invite change to happen, right? You can't control it. But the ones that are often overlooked, incentives so often, in fact, someone will have a really cool design space. It'll be a new location. It'll be very sexy. Now we're doing innovation, but they didn't actually change who the people are. They didn't change the mindset. They didn't change the goals, any of those sorts of things. Or often happens the resources. You don't give the education, the training to be able to do that. So, yeah, good observations. Good question. Thank you. Do we have time for one more?
Yes.
I really liked your what you just said. I want to start with that. I don't want to seem to be questioning you, but after listening to you, I really agree, and I really liked what you said. But I have a feeling that everything you mentioned is like an enabler. Like, okay, you need. I mean, if you have these 5 points, you will create an environment that fosters innovation. But then, I have this impression that there's something else, like something that sparkles actual innovation in the adequate or in the right environment that you're creating by following these points. I don't know if you have a comment to that. And I don't know if this could be related to the first or one of the first slides when you mentioned the 3 waves of innovation. I don't know if they are like complementary. I don't know if you want to build again.
Yeah, okay, those are great points, questions. Yeah, if I or anyone could sum up organizational cultural change, crafting a culture of innovation in 45 minutes, I'd be so rich. So yes, there's a lot that's missing, absolutely. These are enablers, and they're not even the only 5. There's many different aspects of it, but it's an important point. There's the environment, the mindset to help foster innovation. But that alone is not innovation either. What are the needs we're going to be targeting? What are the possible solutions we could have? Then how do we actually prototype those, pilot them, get them out there? All those questions, all those aspects are really, really important of innovation. So this is, I think, enabler is a great word. This helps enable an environment where innovation is more likely to foster. It will take time. Even with the best culture, you won't have innovation if you don't have the right tools and abilities to actually do that. So I'm not sure if I answered, but more saying you're absolutely right. There's a lot more to it. Was there a second question that I skipped over?
Well,
the 3 waves.
Exactly. Relating, I don't know if there's a way to say that perhaps culture is, complements, I forgot how you call them, but the financial side or the profitability and then the creativity.
Yeah, I think perhaps the easiest way to think about innovation as in the different components that come together is what is used in design thinking. It's a Venn diagram, 3 overlapping circles where you have to have understanding of people's needs. What's desirable? You have to also have understanding of what's possible out there in the world. Design and technology comes in. So what's actually feasible? But then the third part, what's viable, meaning how could we actually make money? So you bring some of the other aspects. So perhaps that sums up how it has evolved as far as the big question executives have on their mind. It tends to be in the 3 waves, where now it's like, okay, wow, the hardest part is actually right here, right in front of me and the people we have in the organization. How do we change to enable the innovative idea we just discovered? So
Thank you.
I'm happy to talk more after. Great. Okay, one more. Well, I'm saying one more. It's up to you guys.
Thank you. Well, We are a consultancy. We work with organizational design, and we use a lot of design thinking in our processes. And many companies come with us to create change. We work with change management process. We also sometimes help them create innovation teams, or they call us like, I want people to be more innovative or to accept change.
The classic, make my people more innovative.
Exactly. And sometimes it happens that the main contact we have with the company is usually the human resources area. And sometimes they come with us and they tell us like, we want them to be more innovative or open to change, but you know they're engineers, so don't give them something too creative because you will scare them. And
Poor engineers.
Sometimes that's like, okay, you want them to change, but you already have like a huge paradigm that how can you develop those capabilities if you who are supposed to detect the need, you are limiting them already with those ideas.
Yeah, it speaks to, I actually went on a hiatus, a big break from organizational change and all of that for precisely that reason. I studied organizational psychology. I was excited to make the change happen and had some success with certain groups, but then always ran into something as like, well, yes, but the boss said that. You know, and it's always run up against somebody. And took a break from that, saying, well, what am I going to be able to do? What's interesting is that it's both have to happen, the top down and the bottom up. Most all innovation and change is already happening within the organization. You just have to be able to find who's doing it. And they probably have to do it secretively because they'd get in trouble, right? But it's happening out there somewhere. But it's not going to happen organizationally wide without management buy-in. And so a lot needs to happen with the executive team to be able to help them process what their fears are, what their goals are, and simply to remember some of those basic human skills. So it's absolutely a challenge. The caveat would be, if anyone trying to change the organization, that don't expect to do it without the executives. But don't expect to do it with just the executives only. Find out where it's happening. See if you're middle management or something, find an area where it's innovation, give them a little space, funnel a little bit more money towards them, find a quick win, build a good story, take that to the executives. Say, hey, you know, we saw this challenge, we tried this, here's specifically what happened, and make sure you have a number and a percentage sign, and make it positive. Probably doesn't matter what number it is, but make sure there is an increase in something good. Executives need to be able to see the number. But find where it's happening already, help it flourish, get a case study, take it up, and say this is what needs to happen. I'm sure I could learn from you guys as well, so we'll talk after. All right, well, thanks so much. Really
Thank you,
appreciate it, guys.
Clynton. Thank you. Bueno, muchísimas gracias a todos. Ahora va a haber un breve resumen de uno de nuestros actuales alumnos del MBI, es muy chiquitita. Y bueno, agradeceros muchísimo de verdad vuestra asistencia. He visto que muchos habéis tomado apuntes, habéis estado grabando, etcétera. Entonces, pues la verdad se agradece, ¿no? Que todo este esfuerzo que tenemos en traer gente como Clynton, pues haya gente que le interese y pueda disfrutar de él. Entonces, bueno, sin más dilación, Enrico, por favor, que ya te hiciste esperar.
While he's coming up, the one thing I told Laura, I'm not forget, I would love to see you guys again. March 3 was mentioned earlier, but we're doing a class specifically around designing experiences. So this will be a one weekend instead of 2 weekend class, but it's open to everyone. That's what's so fantastic about that. I will be there. It will be very hands-on. While it won't be focused precisely on culture, it will be an equally important one. How do you create those meaningful experiences for customers that you have, which does include you understanding as a culture what those experiences are, right? Thanks. Sorry.
Bueno, un aplauso para Enrico, por favor.
Gracias. Bueno, pues gracias. Gracias por la invitación. Yo ahorita estoy tomando el Masters y en innovación. Me invitaron a platicarles un poquito de lo que ha sido mi experiencia. y la verdad es que ha estado increíble. O sea, no me imaginaba lo que ha sido. Me quedan todavía 6 meses de clase y no nada más he aprendido mucho, sino que la maestría tiene mucha práctica, muchas sesiones de practicar en equipo. Ahorita que nos platicaban de cómo cultivar los equipos y la innovación y demás, pues te das cuenta que lo empiezas a hacer de manera intuitiva porque lo estás practique y practique y practique y practique. La gente que he conocido también está increíble. O sea, desde los primeros 3 meses yo ya había rentabilizado lo que cuesta la maestría con un partnership que hice ahí con un compañero y que me ayudó a meterme con un cliente con el que él trabajaba. Yo llevo, ¿qué será? Desde el 2005 trabajando en tecnología, entonces siempre me ha gustado el desarrollar cosas nuevas, cosas que no existen, y pues bueno, pues siempre nos topamos con todo como frontera organizacional o cultural en donde la gente luego, y justo también de lo que nos platicaban ahorita, ¿no? El cambio cultural luego es lo que más trabajo cuesta. Entonces, pues aprendes técnicas muy padres, conoces gente bien padre, cada módulo te traen a un maestro diferente. Me acuerdo muy bien que el primer módulo trajeron a un maestro de Chicago que se llama Joe Kim y él luego como que definió la ética del grupo y el estilo que íbamos a llevar más que de responsabilidad, como que de respeto, de ser puntuales, de estar atentos a las exposiciones de los demás. Y te empiezas a dar cuenta que cada maestro con su clase te va como forjando un enfoque diferente y lo padre también es que tú entras con tu proyecto. Sí están súper enterados de cómo es el programa y la maestría y todo, ¿va? Entonces, todos, ¿no? Bueno, para entrar necesitas tener un proyecto que quieras desarrollar. Lo puedes cambiar después, pero el chiste es que lo tengas. Entonces, eso también te ayuda muchísimo porque pues, tú ya traes tu idea súper clavada y ya crees que por ahí va, pero de repente un maestro pues, te cuenta todo su tema y te das cuenta de muchas cosas y luego otro de otra. Hay otro maestro que te habla de clusters, otro de design thinking y entonces te empiezas a replantear muchas cosas. Los mismos alumnos y compañeros también te van dando su opinión y te van dando su feedback y te empiezas a dar cuenta que sí hay perspectivas súper diferentes y maneras súper diferentes para resolver un mismo problema. De hecho, en la última clase nos pusieron un reto increíble, o sea, fue, más o menos se los platico, pero fue hacer equipos y teníamos un día para desarrollar un producto o servicio y salir a venderlo y ganaba el equipo que más dinero generara. No lo tenías que cobrar tal cual, con que hubiera un compromiso de compra, lo lograbas. Y no, bueno, o sea, nosotros ya sabes, emocionadísimos y lluvia de ideas y de repente de brayas y regresas y demás. Y el equipo que ganó, o sea, sí te quedas así de, wow, o sea, ¿cómo se les ocurrió esto? Y ideas muy, muy, muy buenas. Yo ya de hecho ahorita justo mañana tengo una presentación para venderle a un cliente un proyecto y yo algo que ya hago es, les platico de los principios de trabajo de nuestra empresa y muchos de ellos los he ido aprendiendo en la maestría. Mucho tiene que ver con pues, design thinking. ¿Conocen design thinking un poquito o no tanto? ¿Sí? A mí de hecho tomé el certificado de design thinking previo a la maestría como para convencerme y ahí también pues luego dije, oye, pues esto está muy padre. Pero en resumen, design thinking es acota o define muy bien tu problema. Imagina soluciones que sean, como bien dijo acá el profe, que sean financieramente viables, tecnológicamente posibles y lo más importante, deseables desde el punto de vista del usuario o del consumidor, para entonces intentar, probar. Y el chiste es hacer prototipos que sean lo más baratos posibles. O sea, me ha pasado, ¿no? Oye, vamos a probar esta idea, hay que invertir $1 millón y comprar 1000 máquinas y ver si jala. Espérate, güey, espérate. O sea, es mucho más sencillo salir con una, o ni siquiera, puedes hacerlo en un papel y hacer que la gente interactúe con el papel y ir viendo si la solución que estás proponiendo es deseable o no para el mercado al que lo quieres enfocar. Entonces, vas forjando esta forma de pensar diferente. Yo les juro que ahorita me gustaría que todo mundo supiera lo que aprendemos en la maestría. sería muchísimo mejor definitivamente el mundo, seríamos más conscientes de que no importa, o sea, el chiste es probar y probar y probar, hasta que encuentres este product market fit, que es lo que hace que algo explote, ¿no? Y seguramente han escuchado 1000 historias, ¿no? Desde Instagram, Airbnb, o sea, todas estas historias de éxito estuvieron en momentos críticos en los que ni siquiera se creía que le fueran a pegar, y bueno, pues el intentarlo y el perderle el miedo y el aventarse y el conocer este procesito de cómo pues probar las cosas te ayuda, ¿no? Entonces, yo la verdad lo recomiendo mucho. De hecho, yo metí a tres amigos míos a esta maestría que empieza mañana. Ahorita me estaban diciendo que queda un lugar, ¿va? Queda un lugar mañana, entonces, pues el que se anime, yo sí se los recomiendo ampliamente. Y pues no sé si quieran preguntarme lo que sea de mi experiencia o cómo ven, que les cuente algo más. ¿Ya están cansados?
Bueno, gracias, Enrique. Un aplauso para mí.
Gracias.
Bueno, vamos a finalizar ya. Cualquier duda, pregunta sobre estos diferentes posgrados que tenemos, tanto el máster, los certificados y los masterclasses que os comenté antes, os podéis acercar conmigo. También, bueno, soy Aida Méndez, que antes ni me presenté. Y también tengo a mis compañeros Ángel y a Laura, que debe estar por ahí escondida. Entonces, cualquier cosita, ahí está Laura, que es nuestra coordinadora académica, ella sabe todas las cosas difíciles para mí de títulos y cuándo vienen los profesores y todo eso. Pero bueno, precios, costos, descuentos, becas, os podéis acercar conmigo o incluso si no tenéis tiempo ahorita, os doy una tarjeta a los que me la pidáis y encantada de haberos tenido hoy aquí. Muchas gracias.